In this video, I'm going to show you how to create a watercolor sample sheet. You will be demonstrating at least 7 different watercolor techniques on the sample sheet of watercolor paper. First, trace the square I give you 9 times on your watercolor paper. Placing the square 3 down and 3 across will fit best. Then label your page watercolor samples, outline your shapes, and label 7 of the shapes with the 7 watercolor techniques listed on your handout. You'll notice 2 will be unlabeled at this time. Before you begin, you will need to take a watercolor paint set, a cup filled with clean water, and at least 1 watercolor brush. I have 2 brushes handy, a size 6 and a size 8 round brush, and I also have a watercolor technique sheet handy and a paper towel. The first technique I'll demonstrate for you is a wash. I'm going to do a flat wash first, which means the color will be the same shade throughout. So instead of just painting straight from the watercolor set, add some water in the palette or lid of your paint set. Then you can brush on the paint and get a nice even coating of that one solid color. If you'd like to make a graduated wash, then you're going to paint from dark to light. You could overlap a flat wash with more color on one side to do so if you wish. Next, let me show you how to do the wet in wet technique. First, lay down some water with your paintbrush, filling in the whole square. Then you will gently dab on some color from any colors you choose, but do think about how colors mix because they're going to bleed out and mix with the water on your watercolor paper. Anytime your paper is wet and you paint with another color next to it, the colors can bleed into the other wet areas. Next, I'll demonstrate the dry brush technique. This is kind of self-explanatory. You want to make your brush as dry as it can be and use paint that is also very dry. But also you can spread the bristles of your paintbrush, dip it into the paint, and then brush the paint on, and you will see beautiful textures appear. This can be wonderful for trying to show grass or other areas that are just a little bit more textured, like hair, fur, feathers, etc. Next, I want to show you what a little bit of salt can do to your paint. I'm first just painting my square, and I'm keeping it very wet because when you apply salt, you have to apply it to very wet paint. So I'm using a little bit of red violet. I mixed some purple and red together in the lid of my paint set, and I'm blending that into some purple. Now I'll add some salt to the very wet paint and I'll just let it dry. What happens is some of the pigment gets absorbed into the salt and you'll get some little spots left behind. You'll see that more clearly later in this video. Next, I'm going to demonstrate blotting. All you need for this is a paper towel. You're going to paint your square any way you want, but for me, I'm going to do a wash of blue into purple into red violet. And once I'm finished and my paper is still very wet with paint, I'm going to take my paper towel, I'm just going to blot areas away. The paper towel will absorb some of the paint, leaving behind a white space or at least a lighter looking space. And this can be great for clouds. Next, I'm going to demonstrate a crayon resist. Just color using crayons, make any kinds of textures or shapes that you wish. And then when you're finished, you're going to paint over the area, and the paint and the wax will resist each other. What works best, and you'll see this in my demonstration, is using contrasting colors of paint. When I paint over the left side of my paper using a light color of light blue, you don't see as much contrast. But when I use black paint on the right side, you really see the crayon designs pop. Alright, next up, let me show you how to do some tape masking. All you need for this is masking tape, and wherever you place the tape, the paper will remain white. Our tape is very sticky, so if you're using regular masking tape that's very sticky, just touch it a bunch first before you place it down. If you can get washi tape or artist's tape, that does work better, by the way. You can also cut the tape. This is best because without cutting it, your tape is very thick. And then once you have your design made, paint inside the spaces. Now lastly, you have 2 empty shapes. These are for you to experiment in, or if you need to retry any of the 7 techniques that are on your handout, do so in these 2 spaces. What I'm showing you right here is a really quick sunset. I started by just creating that outline of a sun using yellow, and then I went through the yellow, orange, red, and then purple going from bottom to top. Added in a little bit more purple for clouds and a little yellow ring around the sun. And finally, a little bonus technique for you. If you choose to try this, plastic wrap can be added on top of wet paint to create a really cool texture. It almost looks like, I don't know, like a broken glass, or a little bit like a spider web, I guess, in some cases. So watch here how I just place a little sheet of plastic wrap on top of very wet paint. I'm going to let this dry like this, and you'll see when I lift it off later how cool the paint remains. All right, here my painting is dry. It has been about 30 to 45 minutes. I can now remove my masking tape and see the tape masking that I created. Just remove your tape carefully so you don't rip your paper. And then once the paper is dry, I can also take off my plastic wrap, and I can brush off my salt just using my fingers. And you can see the kind of texture you get from the salt and plastic wrap there. Oopsies, I want you to see what happens when you make a mistake and there's an accident. Accidents happen. This one I did on purpose, but all you need to do when you have an accident is place a little bit of water down on your paper with your paintbrush and just blot it up. Very simple. Okay, cleanup time. Your paint lids are going to have paint on them from mixing. Wet the paint again with your paintbrush and just absorb it with your paper towel. Your paint lids should be nice and clean. When you return them at the end of class, leave the paint lids open so the paint can dry. Bring your brush and cup of water to the sink. Clean your brush and place it bristles up in the cup of brushes. Rinse your water cup and stack the cups at the sink. And lastly, place all wet paintings that you have on your class's drying rack.